Greetings, friends. In my second to last video having to do with the thermometers being used with this COVID stuff, I wanted to apologize for the amount of anger in my voice. What happens is that I go to work I show up to work at 5 a.m. So on my days off, I wake up early, and so while I had a coffee at that point, all of my normal biorhythms and whatnot were not into full gear, so I wasn't my usual rosy fucking self. So that's done. What we have here is some nicotine lozenges, which you can get free from 1-800-QUIT-NOW, and you have to tell them that you call it the American Cancer Society or something. They want to know how you found them. And I was going to try again, but I did try again, but it only lasted for like 2 or 3 hours. It's there's something more to it than just the nicotine. Probably has something to do with oral fixation. I know someone is saying that it has to do with us seeing our breath, but I've never felt compelled when I lived up north and it was freezing outside to go outside and watch my breath. But there could be something to that as well. I know there are some positive mental effects from nicotine, but it's more than the nicotine addiction. I think it's there's got to be something else about tobacco, which, if it hadn't been so screwed up by the tobacco industry and with what they made cigarettes into, it wouldn't. I don't even think it's very harmful. It's all the additives. I'm well aware of the gender issue with Paris Hilton and her sister. I still like them, and I'm kind of I've come to see the whole transgender thing as really just another rabbit hole that's a diversion. I mean, I'm glad to have the information because it is with most stars and singers, seems to me to be over 90%. So, I'm glad to have the information and to know what I'm looking at most of the time. But at the same time, I don't want to be, at times I know I've been overly judgmental and kind of hateful to them. And, they didn't choose that. That's done to them by their parents. And I think Joni Mitchell probably has has an issue with that as well. I mean, not that she has an issue with it, but I think she's probably part of that whole thing as well. Okay, I want to say something about Laurel Canyon, but before I get to that, I know a girl that I work with who, talking about COVID-19, she gives me rides part of the time, and I was mentioning that how crazy this thing is, because and God knows what some of these people think I'm talking about with some of the things I say, because they're like not into the kind of stuff I watch and research and so on. But I was saying that this COVID-19 thing is so crazy because it's not that there's not something to it as far as, being the common cold, but yet, and I didn't say all this, but okay, let me just tell you the part where about her is that she said that she did have it, and that she was in bed for 3 or 4 days, and she's rather large, and she said she wasn't, she couldn't eat, and she had the chills, and it did sound different than just a regular flu and, just a regular cold. And then the other thing is that these things going all the way back to SARS and whatnot, they're all patented. And I don't think you could patent something that is just a hoax and imaginary. Not saying that there's not a big hoax aspect to this, but I'm just saying that, there is something real to it. And I know somebody else who I've mentioned many times that I listen to says they had it. And I certainly don't dispute that. But, yet and still it is, I mean, I don't know how people would get these things, because if a virus is something that occurs inside of us to fight off disease, then is it something that's being sprayed on people from above, or is it possibly to do with the radio frequencies, and that certain people are susceptible to this thing? In other words, maybe it's being transmitted right into our cells, like through 5G, for instance. I know some people say 5G is not here yet, and that's just not true. It's been in every business I've worked in the last 3 or 4 years. The actual, towers are not, they're not everywhere yet, but it's very much in cable systems and, internet delivery. So 5G is widespread, but I didn't mean to get too much into that, except that a lot of people say they don't know anybody who's had it. Well, now I can say that I do. And they do pay for sick leave for it. And I mean, I have more questions about it still, really, than answers. but it's not a complete hoax. Is my main point there. So Joni Mitchell is one of the Laurel Canyon musicians, and I've also evolved a bit on my thoughts on, that aspect of the military intelligence being involved with music. The more I think about those people's lyrics and their music and their careers, I mean, yeah, Crosby, Stills, and Nash have done Find the Cost of Freedom about 500 times, and say Find the Cost of Freedom buried in the ground, and that's not true. Because the world is not free. We were not free before this COVID stuff. We were much more free, but this whole system of money and slave labor and the birth certificate and the rest of it is all to keep us restrained. There's so many things that bind us as men and women. But as far as the Laurel Canyon aspect, which I don't really feel like I would need to go into at this point, if you're not familiar, I guess look it up. But I'm hard pressed to find out how much harm any of that did. I mean, it certainly didn't give other people a fair shake to get into the music business, but the music that was put out from there, I think it was almost more of like a nepotism type of thing than steering our thoughts. I mean, I know there's some of that, but there again, it's just, I guess, kind of a rabbit hole that I'm kind of maybe reached a more comfortable or evolved place with. And so this song, Passion Play, When All the Slaves Are Free, is on her 1991 album called Night Ride Home. And I have yet to get deep into her 1970s stuff, perhaps because of the 2 or 3 of those songs that had such heavy airplay, like the one about Help Me, I Think I'm Falling in Love Again, and They Paved Paradise and Put Up a Parking Lot. I just can't deal with some things that are just were drilled into my head like that. But this was her 14th album, which came out in 1991, and it was her first album not to be distributed by the WEA family of labels. She had been signed to Asylum and Reprise labels in the past, and Warner Brothers Records had been the distributor for Geffen from 1980 to 1990. That year, Geffen was sold to MCA, now Universal Music Group. As a result, the album was distributed by Uni Distribution, and which is the distribution arm of MCA, which also took over the rest of the Geffen catalog. This only didn't even sell 500,000 copies as of 2007. And before I get into these lyrics, I also wanted to. This is got some pretty heavy Christian overtones, and what I wanted to say about that is that I relate heavily in a lot of ways to Christ consciousness and the spiritual aspects of, Jesus and the other 12 or so similar stories. And sometimes I wish I wasn't so hardcore in some of the ways I think about things, because I probably take a harder line towards people at times than I should about some of this. But religion is, again, it's to hold you back, to hold you back from. And so at the same time, I can't get away from that, which is why I always, for at least a couple decades or more, have been more into spirituality and, I guess, truth, which is not the greatest thing to have that label, because I had a class one time had something to do with social services, and that's one of the other things I've studied. And if I'd have finished the internship, I would have had an associate degree in addictions counseling. And I think that's a pretty straightforward area of psychology, addictions counseling. As far as a lot of the other areas of psychology kind of reinforce and steer people in a way that I don't think is usually very healthy, because it's from that core that cybernetics and, to a certain degree, transhumanism kind of spring. But getting back to the thing about Christianity, and then I also have come to the realization that Christianity did come from paganism. So, that led me back to the point of realizing that pagan, even though it just means someone who more or less lives in the woods and is not churched or is an outer dweller, the things that are ascribed to it, with symbols and gods and fire and, in some instances, witchcraft and voodoo. Well, that also reminds me of the first book I ever read that had to do with witches, was that there's only one power with what people think of and talk about as God. There's only one thing there, and that that resonates with me. I'm not saying there's not different, entities and all of that kind of stuff, but as far as the core creator, I think it's just one thing, and that does not mean endorsing or condoning the dark side, but it's I think it's only one thing, and I think it's part of this realm that causes, and very much from the control structure and so-called elite that want us to see things in such a dichotomy all the time, when it's really just it's just one thing. But the other thing that's kind of confused me about that is that I don't know who. I guess maybe you really don't have to, but I don't know what the entity is for this thing that I think of as the one thing, which I tend to think of as good. And as Joseph Campbell once said, what you want to do is lean toward the light. That's all you can do. And then, that gets into a whole debate as well. At one time, I thought there was a good light and then like a bad light, which I used to associate with Lucifer, but I don't think that's necessarily accurate anymore either. It's like the longer you live and learn, you realize that everything has been so turned upside down as it's presented to us, and upside down, inverted, perverted, etc., that it's hard to know what to make of what to make of things. So anyway, on to this song. She mentions Magdalene, which may refer to Mary Magdalene, a disciple of Jesus, which is all inside of us. It's not literal. I'm saying that part, but Magdalene, a feminine given name, and list of persons with that name. Also, the college, Oxford, a constituent college of the University of Oxford, Magdalene College. But Magdalene means watchtower, watchful, and is of Latin origin, a place name used as a surname for people from the village of Magdala on the Sea of Galilee. And then another thing that she mentions in this song, she says an Exxon Blue. And actually, I'm old enough to remember when Exxon was Esso. And their sign used to be like a oval, and then they changed it to the rectangle when they went from Esso to Exxon. But the Exxon Valdez oil spill occurred in Prince William Sound, Alaska, March 24th of 1989. An oil tanker owned by Exxon Shipping Company bound for Long Beach, California, struck Prince William Sound's Bly Reef, 1.5 miles west of Tedet Lick, Alaska, at 12:04 a.m. It spilled 10.8 million U.S. gallons of crude oil over the next few days. It's considered the worst oil spill worldwide in terms of damage to the environment. The Valdez spill is the second largest in U.S. waters after the 2010 Deepwater Horizon oil spill in terms of volume released. Prince William Sound's remote location, accessible only by helicopter, plane, or boat, made government and industry responses difficult and severely taxed existing response plans. The region is a habitat for salmon, sea otters, seals, and seabirds. The oil originally extracted at the Prudhoe Bay oil field eventually affected 1,300 miles of coastline, of which 200 miles were heavily or moderately oiled. So now getting on to the actual lyrics. Many of the songs on this album, Night Ride Home, frequently would bring tears to my eyes. Probably had as much to do with where I was in life at the time as well, but nonetheless, you'd be hard pressed to find someone that is as deep and as just, I mean, there's such a tapestry to her writing. Magdalene is trembling like a washing on a line, trembling and gleaming. Never before was a man so kind, never so redeeming. So there we go with the Christian overtone that I was talking about, because it starts off with Magdalene trembling and ends up with talking about a man never being so kind and never so redeeming. The other thing I meant to mention about my problem with Christianity and the dozen or so other stories like that is that I think it's part of the original control structure to make us believe that we are sinners and that we need to be forgiven. I'm not saying that I throw out the idea of forgiveness altogether in life. Obviously, they push this idea of us being fallen. So whether you go along with that or believe that or not, there's struggles in life and there's things that you're going to do and think that you need to be forgiven from. But just the overall whole thing about attending church and the whole Savior thing, I think that's not accurate and not something that I choose to relate to in a religious way, at least. Magdalene's trembling like washing on a line, trembling and gleaming. Never before was man so kind, never so redeeming. Enter the multitudes in Exxon blue. That's no doubt talking about humanity, the multitudes. In Radiation Rose, ecstasy, now you tell me. Radiation Rose is probably referring to nuclear stuff, which that is one thing the Laurel Canyon musicians pretty much they do go along with and many of them might not have even known either that nukes are not a real thing, but you may have heard the stories about how Chernobyl is, I think there's a thriving, terrarium type atmosphere in some of those places that, or no, maybe I'm mixing up nuclear reactor with nuclear weapons, but because nuclear reactors, as far as that part I think is real. Well, anyway, not to get too far down that rabbit hole, she's talking about nuclear or something, I believe, when she says in Radiation Rose, ecstasy. Now you tell me, who are you going to get to do your dirty work when all the slaves are free? I am up a sycamore, looking through the leaves, center of some position. Who in the world can this heart healer be, this magical physician? So again, she's saying that she is up a tree, perhaps like a snake, looking through the leaves, a center of some position. And then again, going back to the idea of a redeemer. Who in the world can this heart healer be, this magical physician? Enter the multitudes in Exxon blue, in Radiation Rose. Misery, you tell me, who are you going to get to do the dirty work when all the slaves are free? Oh, enter the multitudes, the walking wounded. They come to this diver of the heart of the multitudes. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done. And how beautiful is that, even if I don't agree with the whole Christian thing, which I mean, she's not exactly, but anyway, just the idea of there being a new kingdom coming, and that there is a will available that's higher and better than ours, more righteous, and I don't have a problem with that. I'm not so crazy about kingdom, at least from what I understand in modern times of royalty. But maybe there was a time when that was, maybe that's something else that's been inverted and turned upside down. Maybe there was a time when someone being a king was not a negative thing. Oh, climb down, he says to me, from the ... So yeah, I thought that was pretty, getting back to the COVID thing, I that was kind of, a shock to me that I knew somebody that had actually had it, and I no longer believe it's a complete hoax. Although but yet we have learned that a virus is something that occurs inside of us to fight off disease. That's something that you can. Even Wikipedia tells you that. But yeah, I guess that'll do it for now. Thanks for joining me, and talk to you soon.